Hello everyone, I'm Xingchen, and this is my IMA capstone midterm presentation. In the next few minutes, I will introduce what my project is about and my research question that leads my research so far. I will then review the key sources I found useful to my project. Finally, I will discuss my research plans in the future. So let's begin. Inspired by my past experiences, I've decided to design an interactive storytelling game for my capstone project. It will recreate the traumatized experience of adults who have witnessed domestic violence or unhealthy arguments between parents as children, for players to immerse in and appeal to the audience's empathy. I believe that this project is significant because we tend to pay more attention to the direct victims of domestic violence and neglect those helpless witnesses, especially after they enter adult life, who may still hurt just as much. Therefore, I feel it's necessary to find a way for the general public to gain more understanding of adults who have experienced such childhood trauma. And I feel that this is also closely related to the skills and interests we pursue at IMA. According to McGonagall, games can push and enable us to build stronger connections, as well as provide solutions to pressing problems. Bellman and Flanagan further point out that fostering empathy is a key method or goal in games for prosocial causes. Therefore, I'm interested in addressing the problem with an interactive storytelling game aimed at stimulating empathetic feelings in players. Now let's turn to my research question. Since I have a clear interest and have grasped enough background knowledge about it, I have formulated my research question quite early this semester. The question is, how can the narrative experience from a virtual game contribute to fostering empathy with adults who have witnessed domestic violence or unhealthy arguments between parents as children? The question can be broken down into 4 smaller and more specific questions. Why do this group of people need to be acknowledged and understood? Why is it feasible to develop empathy with adults who witness domestic violence as children? How exactly can storytelling games create empathy in players? And what are some existing empathy games from which I can draw experience to apply in my own game? With these questions in mind, we can now review and analyze the 4 key sources that interweave to answer them. The 4 questions have basically guided my research in the first half of the semester. For the first question, I think the article Adults with Witnessing Histories, The Overlooked Victims of Domestic Violence by Von Steen provides a great answer. This article summarizes the previous research efforts by university professors and researchers from other institutions toward the long-term effects of witnessing domestic violence in one's childhood. According to the author, adults who witness domestic violence as children are often forgotten and not widely recognized, which corresponds with my previous stance. The seriousness of ongoing relationship and psychological effects on adults with witnessing histories is also pointed out, which include difficulty to establish and maintain intimate relationships, as well as lower self-esteem, more anxiety, depression, and aggression. The level of neglect and the severe consequences the adults are going through both indicate the necessity to acknowledge and understand this group of people. Next, the work by Von Steen and the article Designing Games to Foster Empathy by Bellman and Flanagan echo with each other and constitute a response to the second question: why is it feasible to develop empathy with adults who witness domestic violence as children? This question may seem weird at first glance, but it needs to be asked, because according to Bellman and Flanagan, it's inherently difficult to be empathetic with certain groups of people. Their article provides an overview of what scholars have discovered about empathy, and touches on principles derived from the literature to help games elicit players' empathy. However, they claim that while empathy can improve people's attitudes and behaviors towards other individuals, it won't always work. For example, if you have negative stereotypes of or rigid prejudice against a group of people, or if you can't find any similarity between yourself and that group, it's usually more difficult for you to be empathetic with them. Fortunately, according to Von Steen, although adults who witness domestic violence as children are often neglected, no evidence shows that this group is stigmatized or prejudiced against. Also, the feelings caused by their witnessing histories like anxiety and depression are common feelings the general public can feel as well from time to time. Hence, a shared similarity can be found. As a result, it's possible to create empathy in players with them. Furthermore, for the third question, both the article by Bellman and Flanagan and the first chapter from the book How Games Move Us by Isbister offer some constructive answers. In designing games to foster empathy, Based on their understanding of how empathy functions, the authors propose a set of principles for the design of games to particularly foster empathy. For example, the game may explicitly ask players to empathize, or encourage them to take on the focused empathetic posture. The chapter by Asbestor, on the other hand, explains how games are more powerful in evoking emotional responses, which are more than empathy, compared to other types of media. Several factors lead to this. Firstly, players make their own choices and experience their consequences in a game. Also, the avatars and NPCs provided by games allow players to identify and engage in new ways, enabling them to walk in others' shoes and relive a situation they may never experienced before. Finally, games also offer customization options to players to encourage their projection and emotional attachment to the game. In short, Asbestor shows us the possibility of using the internal mechanism and elements of a game to evoke emotional responses. Empathy is conceivably one of which, while Bellman and Flanagan direct our attention to the external techniques we can adopt as designers to make empathy happen. Last but not least, in terms of existing empathy games to learn from, the article A Storytelling Game to Foster Empathy and Connect Emotionally with Breast Cancer Journeys documents the goals, game development, and playtesting results of a game called Cancer Sucks in detail. The game aims to create an interactive breast cancer experience to connect people with the real-life, complicated experience instead of their imaginary. With a similar purpose and a game genre, this game taught me a lot. Production-wise, the designers adopted the player-centered approach and carefully studied the facial expressions on the protagonist to better elicit empathy in players. During user testing, they had the audience answer a questionnaire after playing the game to assess whether empathy is created in them. These are all incredible methodologies I can apply in my own game. Additionally, in Asbestor's book and Bellman and Flanagan's article, the authors also list a few empathy games they consider successful. Although these games do not present a complete story but rather immerse players in a specific situation, I believe the actual mechanics they implement towards empathy fostering are worth learning. I will play and examine them myself, critique their limitations, and borrow their success in my own project in the future. So much for the literature review. I'd like now to talk about how I will proceed my research. As I dug deeper in this field, I found that there are more questions waiting to be solved. For example, is empathy powerful and valuable enough on its own to be the ultimate goal of my project and research question? Or am I seeking other outcomes derived from it, like changed attitudes or behaviors? How can I assess whether and how much empathy is actually created after players play a game? And how can I assess whether the outcomes resulting from empathy are achieved? Hence, I will probably revolve my future research around these new questions to explore more theoretical answers and start to find practical methodology. I will also keep refining my research question in the meantime. And that's all. Thank you for listening.